You're in for a treat this month with a mashup on the importance of knowing your context. Hey friends, this is Gabe Kolstad, and I want you to tune in as we listen to Rick McKinley, Renee Boucher, and Tony Kriz on this important topic. Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
You know, if anybody knows about the importance of this conversation, Rick, it would be you, right? I mean, you've been such a leader in our city, such a catalyst in church planting and, all sorts of different gospel multiplication. We're excited to have you here for sure.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. I want to ask a little bit about why, this conversation, how can understanding the history, of our city help us to be faithful witnesses in our context? So let's kick that around for a minute.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think when, people don't think about the history, or particularly a spiritual history, but oftentimes they don't realize they bring a history, they bring their own understanding of what they think the past was. And Portland's unique, I think, in the sense that there isn't really a religious history. There's some moments like 1905, I think, that there was kind of like a awakening of sorts. But really, people don't have that religious history. That is, well, back in the day when everyone went to church. So there's not a religious memory. I think that's important. It's really different. Most of the people that get saved at a church have some church background, went as a little kid, had a Catholic upbringing, whatever it is. Because the normal Portlander who's having a spiritual awakening, it wouldn't dawn on them. Like church wouldn't be the place to go to. Yeah. So I think knowing the history is important,
Yeah. What do you think, either one of you guys, that informs for us in our activity? How do you take that understanding and then go, okay, let's contextualize that?
Yeah. Well, in the study of anthropology, there's this image or analogy of the cultural onion, and this idea that everyone is like an onion, and there's the things you see on the outside, but you have to peel them off to get to the heart of what's really the core of this culture. And in that idea, right near that core is the experiences that people go through, and experiences not just like in the moment, but through the history of those people. And so I think as the church planter coming in, or the pastor trying to think with like a missiologist, right? Often we want to just look at, there's cultural forms. Okay, they wear plaid and tight jeans. This is what's cool. So I'm going to dress like this and talk like this. And I think too often in church, we deal with forms and think, now I'm contextualized. We don't realize that to get to the core of the worldview, the heart longings, those core elements of a culture, experience and history is far more important than what they wear and fitting in and with whatever the trends are. So I think learning the history and the stories of people and a culture and community really get near the heart of who they are.
Yeah, because we've all seen and done. I mean, I'm probably one of the bigger offenders on this of just going, I think I got it, and then launching something or doing something and realizing, I didn't have it. And, I think there's some collateral damage that happens in that sometimes, depending on who you're dealing with. But if you've gone real public with something that's culturally a misfit, sometimes it takes a long time to recover from that. And you almost have to reinvent again. And that can take a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think in a city like Portland, that, with Portlandia, there's these things that stereotype what Portland is. But it creates a false image, a false perception, where I think most cities are part truth. There's a story there. There's a myth there, that's not really true. It's a promise that doesn't pan out. And then there's a deception there, right? In order to have Portlandia, some things had to occur. We had to gentrify. We had to move a bunch of people out. There's these soft zones around Portland with strip clubs and used cars sales, and food deserts where all the poverty is. And that allows Portlandia to be cool. So that's not showing up. Nobody's tuning in going, oh, this is cool. 122nd and Gleason,
right?
And I think when people come, they're like, yeah, I want to plant Portlandia. I don't want to plant in that soft zone. Or I planted in this cool place and I have no idea that all of the black people that lived here got moved out, and then you're like, whoa, I thought, like, there's a history here. What? And it's like, yeah, it's actually a really bad history. We have an extremely racist past. And so, history is so vital. Yeah. And I think important. I think we all go in not having a clue. Most planners, like, we do a demographic study and then we walk around spouting these things like we really know Portland. Portland has 1.9 million people in the greater Portland area, and there's more pets than children. You're like, oh, yeah, that guy's going to kill it.
Okay, one more question for you on this is, what do you think are some of the factors that make, Portland is known, Portland metro area, the Northwest in general, known as, it's a tough place to plant churches. It's a tough place to start a gospel, initiative. What factors do you think make it hard or gospel resistant maybe?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's probably a number of them, but I would say it's if it's progressive at every level. So what I think we're facing now, the Keep Portland Weird of the 90s, which was, we're going to be on the left as far as left can go. So anything about Christianity that has conservative Christian Judeo ethics, it's always going to push against that. I think that makes it difficult. But I also think the church, most Christians for the last, 100 years, haven't seen any American context as a missionary context. And so they, people still come in and do, preach to the choir, but the choir doesn't live here. And so
that's good.
They're not singing that song. They don't understand that music. They don't know what you're talking about. And you don't, if you're not thinking as a missionary, then you don't understand these kind of windows of redemption and these windows of opposition. So it's either us against Portland, we're going to plant way outside of Portland and be safe from Portland, or, it's kind of the graveyard where we'll take on the forms, we'll drink craft beer and good coffee and make people think we get it. But then you're going to actually bump up against the true agnosticism and relativism and belief systems that make up the ideologies, which are rampant and multiple in Portland. And you realize, well, I don't think I even have a theology of why, heterosexuality is good. I just know it's right,
Mm-hmm.
But is it good and true and beautiful? Or is it just like, don't have sex until you're married and then it'll you'll get married and then you won't have that much and be frustrated, you know, and the church has just as much divorce as anybody else. And so it's like we aren't doing that real missionary work and our own self-critical work, I think, to have true engagement.
That's awesome.
Now, Rick, you mentioned the Keep Portland Weird of the 90s. Now that's right around the time that you're starting to plant Imago Dei, and I remember as a young Bible college student going to a church planters gathering that you guys hosted, I think maybe 2003, 2004, and where you're sharing about the work that you guys are doing and launching these different missional communities and teams impacting the city, and really, I think in that season, crafting the vision of what that means to be a church for the city. I'd wonder, could you tell us a little bit of the story of maybe some of those early years, what was going on in the cultural conversation, and just give us some of that history of Imago Dei community.
Yeah. So, I became a believer in Sacramento, Chico, kind of late 80s, came to faith with zero church background, then came to Multnomah 9 months later. So I didn't have a lot of Christian background, but met my wife and got married and had a couple kids. And Portland was really my spiritual home in a sense. We left for a few years, and then we were either going to go back to California or come back to Portland. And so we moved back to Portland in November of 99, and then started trying to gather a core group right after Y2K when the world didn't blow up. But I would say in that time, there wasn't a lot happening in the urban core around church planning. In fact, I remember trying to get, you're trying to get funding and talking to one denominational guy, and he's like, if you go down there, I mean, those people are tattooed and pierced, and God can clean them up, but they don't have any money. I was like so angry.
In Portland, Blacks and Latinos are discriminated against when renting probably 64% of the time, according to an audit in 2011. We know that kids of color are suspended 4 times more than their peers for the same actions. It continues on today. And we could talk, that's just like a very small, part of what the Black community has experienced here in Portland. We could talk about how the Japanese families were sent to internment camps, during the war. They lost all their possessions, their businesses, everything, and it was never returned to them. The Chinese suffered just incredible discrimination and persecution. There were laws that were written just in terms of who could actually immigrate to the country, and they would allow the Chinese men to come, but they would not allow the women to come, so that the lineage would stop, and no more families would, be brought up here. So we could talk about the First Nations, which we know just the land that was stolen, and how children were forced to go to the residential schools, and some of the atrocities that happened there. That's, we've heard quite a bit in the news about what happened in Canada. But that's all the Pacific Northwest. It happened here too. So there's just a great amount of pain that exists here in the land that we can't ignore. And it's carried through the generations, and the policies and the practices continue today. And so I think until we really learn how to listen and to hear the stories, and we begin to practice lament and really enter into that space of recognizing that there are things that are built into our systems that don't allow for healing and for change, then, we're not going to be able to get where we want to go. And we have to learn to walk alongside of people. Like, we have to learn how to journey together with people. Cause I think we have this tendency as believers to want to save everybody, but Jesus already saved everybody. Like, we don't have to try to do that again. Like how about we just embody his presence and the love and the grace and the mercy, and learn how to just walk beside people and receive from them as much as we try to give. Like, there's so much beauty and wealth and expression and wisdom in these communities of color that I've just been trying to learn as much as I can over the last 10 years and just walk in friendship, that like, I don't have anything to give. I just need to listen and to learn and to walk in that place of lament and understand the pain that has been there.
Yeah. Even as you think about like a church of suffering and like participating in the sufferings of Christ. And like, as we think about that in Lent, or even like, Holy Week and Good Friday, and looking at, what it means to journey and learn from that, instead of coming from a place of triumphalism and, kind of skipping over, I feel like so much of the white evangelical church, it's like, Palm Sunday and whatever understanding of that is. And then we jump right to Easter and resurrection and,
it's hard to hear all of that, honestly, because, I think maybe my own perspective is a lot of times idealism and optimism, and just to just wrestle with the reality of how deep all that is and how difficult it will be to repent from all of that. I can see that's quite a journey for all of us. Yeah.
It requires a lot of humility, right? Like, authentic. And I think this really ties, like, beyond racism. This is really the essence of, like, if we're really going to be able to bring the gospel, like the good news, to Portland, to this region, the Pacific Northwest, like, we have to master humility. We have to be able to, like, go really low, because everything that is built into, like we talk about all those iniquities and everything that's sort of like laid out in the land, all of it speaks to lifting ourselves up. It all, lends itself to trying to create a platform, trying to create a reputation, trying to do it ourselves,
It's works righteousness.
And the answer, like, again, the opposite of that. What's the opposite of that? Like, I'm going to lay myself flat on the ground, I'm going to consider myself nothing. Like, I'm going to put other people's interests higher than my own. I'm going to take on the very nature of Christ, who did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he made himself, a servant to all, so like how do we actually live out the cross in that way, that we would lay down our lives for another. Like, this is what love is, that we would lay down our lives. And how do we practice radical hospitality, that we would love the stranger, those who are unfamiliar and not like us? Like, how would we really begin to practice that, and what could happen if we did? I think, it would be amazing.
I still feel like there needs to be a book written about all of this stuff, because I think it could be so helpful for our city to just have more in front of us about how things are, how things got the way they are, and maybe what the way forward is.
Yeah.
Based on your 30 years of praying about these things, researching, talking with people, journeying with people, what do you think that our city and our region really need the most?
I think we've lost this understanding of community and interdependence. That, like, even today, I think cities all over are being built up in ways that isolate and separate people rather than bringing people together.
Yeah,
and
it leads to loneliness instead of like community and connection.
And so I think we really need to reevaluate like even the communal aspects of what's written in scripture and how do we bring that understanding of like my life impacts yours, and your life impacts mine. Like your joys are mine and your sorrows are mine and your success allows me to actually be more successful. And how do we begin to really care about the flourishing of all people? Like this is when we pray like your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, right? Like this is the picture of shalom to me. Like this is what I'm asking is bring your wholeness, God, bring your flourishing, make all of the wrong things right, bring your restoration, rebuild, in a way that reflects your original intention and desire. And, but a lot of times we take that and we think like, let's do that for the church. Let's do that for the people that believe already, But what does it mean for all people to flourish? And am I concerned about that? And am I trying to create spaces that allow for community for all people, regardless of their faith? And am I creating spaces and practices and policies or, whatever realm I'm in that actually allow for the flourishing of all people, that they would be able to have those barriers removed that are preventing them from seeking the Lord, because that's why they were put in this specific time in this specific place. If we go back to Acts 17,
that's the stewardship of it right there.
So so how am I stewarding this? Am I trying to create a name for myself within Christianity? Or am I stewarding a geographical region in a way that I can ensure that I'm hosting the presence of God, then that I'm being a person of presence for the people around me so that they can find who he is, Yeah.
So deep. Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much entropy. There's so much velocity to the ways that we have lived that we have to do some serious work in order to put on some brakes and to change the way that we live and behave and think as families and as communities and as neighborhoods. And another thing I love about parish is when you're a parish church, you literally, then everybody inside your parish is in your church. They don't have to come to Sunday morning. They don't have to be on your membership roll. You can go whether or not you want to be, you're in our parish. We've just decided we're with you and you're with us. We're going to be in this thing together. I also love that because then suddenly I go, I have to submit to this place because these are my people. So.
Can you share more about where and how you submitted yourself to, an African-American leadership structure?
So at the time I bought that phone from you.
Yeah.
Right around that time, actually, I was a wreck. Being shamed off of Reed campus put me into a spiral. It did. It's like, I'm done. Like, lived in the Muslim world, lived in Yugoslavia during the war. Like, I've done my time, God. Like, went to Reed. I really tried to submit. I really just I just hung it out there. I'm like, God. And I just felt like I was like the best version of myself. It's like, God, this is what you made me for. And then to have Christians come in and go, it's like crap. So me and actually a Reed student, a graduate student that had graduated, he and I started a little business, we called it an economic justice company. And we had all these ideas about these things we were going to do in the city. And he's not a Christian. And so we were going to really get involved in neighborhood development and all this kind of stuff. And of course we were horrible at it. He's blue sky guy, brilliant, genius, blue sky. And, I'm just not that smart in the area of economics. And we were empty refrigerator failing. empty refrigerator failing. And I was in trouble. I was in so much trouble. And we just had a baby and we were pregnant with another one. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I ended up having lunch with this guy from Beaverton. You guys will be happy to know. I got set up on a blind date with this guy who's a businessman. And we got set up because he hated the emergent church and he wanted to basically tell me all the ways that I was wrong because I was this sort of infamous emergent church guy. So I sat and he would just ask me these trick questions where he was just trying to, trap me. I kept answering the questions in ways that were unexpected. And he thought it was going to be a 15-minute coffee, ended up being an hour-long lunch, hanging out together. And at the end of it, he said, you're surprising. You're a surprising guy. You should meet some friends of mine, the white guy. You should meet some friends of mine. Show up at this address next Friday morning. That's 7 a.m. Like, why? He goes, just trust me. So I showed up, and what I found was I was sitting in a circle of primarily African-American men where I was not only the 15th largest personality, meaning there were at least 14 people with larger personalities than me. That doesn't happen very often. But I was also about the 15th largest person in the room. There were guys in there who were 6'10", 6'5", 6'8", 300 pounds. I mean, boom. African Americans, Native Americans, and a couple Hispanic guys, and an Asian guy, and then a smattering of white guys. And I went and I sat there and I watched people do spiritual formation like a gladiator stadium. No rules, no constraints. If you have to put your hands on somebody, you put your hands on somebody. It scared me and it inspired me. And I said, I'm in. And I showed up every Friday morning at 7 for 3.5 hours. And I didn't talk for the first 2 years that I went. I just sat and took it. And we do surgery without anesthesia. That's what we call it. And that group had already been going for almost 20 years when I joined it. And I've been going for almost 20 years now. So that's how it happened. It was magic. And I'll tell you this though, right around that same time, we had started to live communally. And we were doing it as these enlightened, justice-oriented, emergent Christians. And we had just bought our first house and we had a couple extra bedrooms. I'm like, we're going to have people live with us. And we had about
neo-monastic.
We weren't quite neo, but we hadn't gotten there yet. Don't worry. We ended up getting there eventually. But so we opened our doors to people, and we had about 10 or 12 people show up and live in our house with us. And it was great. And we were really excited. We're like, we're doing the work. This is all after Read, this is really great. And one day my wife and I are sitting at the table and we're talking. Like, who else come through here? And we're like listing off all the names of all these really great, beautiful people. Some had gone on to be pastors and done these different things. And we got to the end, and my wife and I looked at each other and we realized every single person that had lived in our house, we had an open door policy. Whoever shows up can live here. They were white, middle class, educated, Christian, church going, they were us. My wife and I looked at each other and we go, we claim to be like enlightened justice people, and we can't attract anyone who literally doesn't look exactly like us, shop like us, vote like us, read like us, worship like us. We couldn't attract anybody. And we got on our knees and we're like, God, help us. We are broken. We were living out Prescott, out near 5 Points, like really tough neighborhood. And we could not attract anybody who literally wasn't just like us. And we're like, God, you have to help us. You have to help us. And within a few months, I had that luncheon with this guy. And then we ended up buying a different house in North Portland. And that house has a red door. And a red door is a historical symbol of this is a place of refuge. And suddenly our door people started to come to our door who weren't like us. It just happened to us. And a lot of it was because we begged God for help. And we're so broken that we can't do it. We're flawed. We're psychologically and spiritually flawed on a level. And so God had to do it. I can remember this one day. I'm in my house and there's a knock at the door. It's like, honey, get the door. All right, I got it. Go down. I opened up our front door, the red door, and standing on our front porch, like blocking out the sun, is this 300-pound Mexican-American man, 20 years old, standing on my front porch. And I'm like, hi, what's going on? He's like, hey, can I stay here? I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I heard you speak once down in Texas, and I've been hitching my way across the country, and I like you. So I'm here to stay in your house. And he moved in for 3 years.
Oh, wow. That was the application process right there.
That was it.
Yeah.
Came in, we're like, wow. It was that much, had nothing to do with us. So it's not easy, man. Whoever asked it, I can't remember.
So can I share a short story of
I've been
a very
talking
similar experience? So when we bought our house in outer Southeast Portland, I had never met a single Muslim my entire life. Where I grew up in Hawaii. There wasn't Muslims there, and I didn't find them. They didn't find me, and we moved to Portland. And again, we think it's this white city, and then we see all these kids walking by going to David Douglas High School, and there's a ton of diversity, all these Africans and Burmese and Afghani, and we go through the first Ramadan in our neighborhood, and there's like all these apartment complexes, and it's so clear they're celebrating this month. And so for the first time, we start praying for the Muslims in our community. And I go for a run one night, and I see these two Arabic-looking guys out smoking cigarettes right across the street from us. We start chatting, and it turns out they're from they're English students from the Arab world, from a Muslim country, and they're like, "Oh, come over for dinner. We want to feed you. We want to meet." And I'm like, "No, you come to my place. No, you come over." And so eventually we get over to their house. We share a wonderful meal. My wife and kids go back across the street, go home to bed. I'm there till like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, drinking Pepsi and talking and eventually gets around to them saying, "Hey, we have this homestay here, but we really don't like this house. We really want to live with some Christians. We want a Christian family to live with." And I thought that was really surprising. Like, wow, really? These Muslim guys, these like conservative Sunni Muslims want to live with Christians. Okay, well, and then I full on do one of the Good Samaritan things where I'm thinking, oh, I know Christians that might host you, that might have room in their house. I know some people. I tell them, okay, I'll talk to people at my church, and I'll see who be willing to host 2 young Arab men in their home, right? And then I get home that night, and I'm talking to my wife, and I said, "It's the weirdest thing. They want to live with a Christian family." And she's like, "Yeah, interesting." She's like, "We have room." Oh. And we just bought this new house, and we have this big finished basement that I unpacked all of my books. I could finally lay out my theological library. Cave. And I got a man cave in my office where I'm going to do all my important pastoral things, and packed up all my books. And I moved my office to the furnace room, and Mohammed and Abdullah moved into our basement.
Nice.
And that began the crash course in being literally family members, adopting in a way Muslim sons. And they live with us, and then they moved out, and then the friend moved in. And then he moved out, and then the cousin moved in.
Nice.
And then he moved out, and the other friend moved in. And It was just, that was the journey of exactly like what you said. When you take that step and you just say, okay, Lord, our home and our life is open. He brings you.
Yeah, people. But if it hadn't been for the fact that you were living on the street outside your house on your block, that probably never would have happened. I mean, getting out from front of our screens, living in our neighborhood, walk every evening, greet your neighbors, intentionally walk a different path every evening as you get out. Make sure that every coffee shop You know, you're going into try and learn the names of, you know, people who work in the shops around your house or whatever. Like, be a part of your neighborhood, and those opportunities, they will come up.
Another thing we just discovered: get a dog.
Get a dog.
So I've been on this have kids kind of track for the last
that got expensive,
16
right?
years. I have a handful of them, and then we stopped having kids, and it's like, okay, well now we got a dog, and you take that dog to the dog park. An hour of nonstop conversations.
Instant friendship.
Wow.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.